Over recent months, something has become heightened, which has existed for a long time, but which I've really noticed during lockdown and with the whole coronavirus and the pandemic, and with other things going on around the world as well. And that is, what is truth? I have felt like I have absolutely no idea. There is so much information being thrown at me, and all different kinds of opinions, and people opposed to each other, and people saying this person's saying this but they're not true, this person has a place of responsibility but this isn't true, they've got another agenda, and it's impossible to know what is truth, how bad are things. And part of me thinks, just ignore it. Don't look at the news, don't try and figure it out, just ignore it. I can carry on my life irrespective of that, and it's not something that's important. But then I read this verse in Ephesians, and it says, and it's talking about when we reach maturity as Christians, and it says we reach that point of maturity, then we will no longer be infants, tossed back and forth by the waves and blown here and there by every wind of teaching, and by the cunning and craftiness of men in their deceitful scheming. It acknowledges that it exists, the cunning and craftiness of men in their deceitful scheming. It's not something that's come up now. It's not something that is only for the leaders that are coming up in the world now. It has existed for a long, long time. And actually, the onus is on us to learn to withstand those lies and to not be thrown this way and that way when those lies are thrown at us. We learn to not be tossed back and forth by the waves, and it's actually an important thing to learn. It's not an ignoring, it's a learning to withstand. And one of the big things in that is discerning. And it's not just for ourselves. The verse goes on, and it says, instead, speaking the truth in love, we will in all things grow up into him who is the head, that is, Christ. It is important that we learn this for the people that we love too. And one thing which I discovered, which shocked me, was I did this factfulness questionnaire by Rosling, and there's a link down below if you want to take it afterwards and see what score you get. And I had read, he said that when asked simple questions about global trends, why the world's population is increasing, how many young women go to school, how many of us live in poverty, we systematically get the answers wrong. So wrong that a chimpanzee choosing answers at random will consistently outguess journalists, Nobel laureates, and investment bankers. So it's not just normal us that are getting things wrong. There's intelligent people who have studied and researched who are getting completely the wrong idea about what's going on in our world. And Hans Rosling gives us 10 instincts, that he calls them, that where we often skew the truth in favour of our instincts, and it's a really helpful tool in being able to look at what we're doubting and weigh it up. So I'm quickly going to go through those 10, and then we'll pray together and spend a bit of time in reflection. So the first one is the gap instinct. And this is what Rosling calls that irresistible temptation to divide all kinds of things into two distinct and often conflicting groups with an imagined gap. So it might be that we divide the world into the rich and the poor, and we forget everything in between, and it skews how we see things. And the second one is the negativity instinct. Our instinct is to go for what is most negative. We don't often look at the things that are good, and this is partly because of the way the media portrays things, but it is a tendency that we have. And then the third one is the straight line instinct. And it's important that we don't assume that things will continue in the same trajectory that they have been taken. The fourth one is the fear instinct. and he talks about the difference between fear and danger. And this is often distorted by the media. They capitalise on our fear, and often we don't perceive what the real dangers might be. And then the fifth one is the size instinct. And he says that this is the media's friend, because it's their job to make any given event or fact or number sound more important than it is. And we just need to learn to put things in perspective. When we get given a huge figure, maybe go and look at what the context of that is. Is that as huge as they have made it sound? Or have they somehow taken that out of context and out of perspective? And then the sixth one is the generalization instinct, where we look at a group, usually a group that we don't belong to, and we look at them and we say, they are like this. And we make them out to be all the same, when actually they are distinct from each other. There are individuals within that we often overlook. And in doing that, we dehumanize people. And then the seventh is the destiny instinct. And he says we need to challenge the idea that today's culture must also have been yesterday's and will also be tomorrow's. Actually, things change as we go forwards, and things can grow and develop over time. And then number 8 is the single perspective instinct. And this is where we just need to recognise that a single perspective can limit our imagination. There are different ways of doing things, and we need to look into the options and not just jump to the one thing that we think must be done. And then the 9th is the blame instinct. And this is calling us to recognise that we have a tendency to want to use scapegoats. We want to place the blame on someone, whether it is theirs or whether it's far more complicated than that. And actually to be able to draw back from that and see that there's interrelated causes all through, and actually very rarely is the blame all one person's. And then the last one is the urgency instinct. And this is where we decide something has to be done now. We're not going to get another chance to do this. We've got to sort this out now. It's urgent. And actually, Rosling says, relax. It's almost never true. It's almost never that urgent, and it's almost never an either or. And actually, we need to ask God for patience and to be able to look into those other options. So as we finish, down below I have put the words of a prayer, praying into each one of these 10 things. So if you want to spend some time reflecting on those prayers, maybe spending time in confession, and maybe looking at where you can apply this and use it to help you find the truth in amongst the barrage of things that are thrown towards us.